Welcome to the Ingewikkeld Sessions podcast, a special podcast today because we're also releasing the video of this podcast due to technical issues with the live stream. We're going to be talking about an interesting subject, which is starting a new gig. And I'm not doing that by myself because I also have Jaap here. Hi, Jaap.
Hello, good evening.
How are you handling starting in a new gig?
Well, first thing for me to figure out is where should I actually start? Of course, your colleague team, colleague developers will hand you over some kind of access to a code base, but you cannot just start digging there, right? Or maybe you can, but you have to have some kind of issue or problem to get started. And I think that's one of the main things I experience, that I have to figure out where to start.
Yeah. I agree. I have a similar issue on a regular basis, especially when the project is a customer that can tell me there is something wrong, but we don't know what, because the development team is slow in delivering, so the development process isn't as it should be, and also the product that gets delivered isn't what it should be either.
Yeah.
But we don't know what the cause is. We don't know where the problem lies. It might have to do something with this or that or this person or that piece of code, but we don't know for sure. And well, good luck. Basically, that's basically that type of project is interesting, because then you really have to dig in. And funny enough, figuring out where the problem is usually not something that is found by digging in the code.
No, it's mostly not a technical issue.
Exactly.
It's mostly a communication issue between customers and departments, or between departments within the company.
Yeah.
And also when you're a small company, where I say departments, please replace that by persons.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And even if it is a technical issue, what I found is that the easiest way to figure out where the problem is, or where to start digging, is by talking to people. Not just the developers, but also managers and maybe even stakeholders inside the company, people that don't know anything about the code, but they will be able to at least give some clues as to why they think things are not working like they're supposed to be working.
And then you have another problem. Which persons should you talk to?
Yes, exactly. And one of my one of the customers that I recently started at, the day I started, they had this wiki page, this Confluence page ready for me with a whole checklist of things to do when you just get started.
Oh, wow.
It was like a full onboarding document, which had things like you have to arrange this, you have to arrange that, and for security, you have to install this software, and but also have a meeting with this person and with this person and with this person and with this person, because these are the people that you will be working with a lot. These are the people that you'll be communicating with a lot. So you need to get to know them. So it was a whole checklist that from top to bottom I could just run through it, and I already immediately was basically part of the team of the company, because I knew these people, I knew the products. I'd installed the code base, the application, had everything up and running, and by the end of the checklist, I was basically ready to go.
Yeah, but you're now talking about a company that's selling a product, right? And when you're in a team that it's just a supportive team to other departments, for example, they are automating things, or the software they are providing to their customers is not their main product, but there's a service they are delivering, and the software is just part of that service. Is much harder, because you will have to get to know what kind of service is this, who are our customers, and from a development perspective, you have to figure out who your customer is.
Yeah.
That might not be a customer outside the company, and that's also an interesting thing I experienced. Is that it's not always clear for a development team who are the customers using our software.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. That's definitely something that's especially if you're building internal tooling instead of external software.
Yeah.
That's definitely a challenge that you run into at some point. And well, again, I think talking to people will give you a very clear idea of what is this company like, what are they doing,
Yeah.
who should I talk to, where is the problem, and who is my customer? Is my customer an internal customer? Is my customer an external customer? And getting an introduction, like a real demo of the software that you're building in a working state, to understand also the domain that you're working in, that can be really useful. Like I had a meeting with, well, this was someone that both had a lot of domain knowledge, but was also a developer in the team.
Yeah.
And basically they started telling me about, this is what our software does. And he started showing me, then you do this, then you do that.
Yeah.
This is the process that our customers go through for the software.
That's really nice. I've worked for companies where I never saw the user interface at all. So I wasn't even aware of what kind of product I was building, apart from the domain terms I saw in the code, of course. I could kind of figure out what kind of application it was, but well, who the customers are and how they were using that particular project, I don't know.
Yeah.
I still don't know.
Yes.
And I've worked there for 9 months. So, and it's not that I try to figure out who the customers were, but they were not communicating about this because it was kind of secret. I think.
Okay. Yeah.
That's a bit weird.
So we've been talking about how we experienced that start and the things that we run into. And already I mentioned at least an example of what a company can do to help that onboarding process. What are things that you think would be good for a company to have? And this is, I mean, we are working as external developers, as contractors, but this goes also for people that are internal hires.
Well, I think it's for internal hires even more important to give them a good onboarding process, because those are the people you will be working with for years. So it is worth the time to invest some time to get to know each other and well, to make them comfortable within the company, so they are able to find the right persons to talk to.
Yeah.
So I think the onboarding process you mentioned with the Confluence space is a very nice thing. But I also think a demo from a salesperson is very nice to see how your customers are actually using your project. But I also think other non-technical things are important for new hires as well, because they want to have some information about facilities a company will give for their home office, for example, since most people are working hybrids these days.
Yeah.
Most companies do have things arranged for their employees, but it's not always that clear that there is something arranged for them. You will have to figure out it yourself, and it's somewhere written in some document of 60 pages long, where also the rules are written about you not being able to work anymore and all other kind of boring stuff you don't want to bother people with at their first weeks at your company. So yeah, I think also the human part of onboarding is very important, especially for developers.
Yeah. So having that documented in an easy to access way, that is probably then the most easy way of doing that.
Well, you could have documented or at least have the process documented. But I think it's important to just talk to people when they get started on your in your company. At my current gig, people get an introduction of half a day where they're just introduced with all kind of departments, and they get a guided tour around the building to just see where all teams are and where you can find people. And I think that's a very good thing to do.
Yeah.
Also, when you are in a hybrid team or in a hybrid company or maybe a full remote company, people need some introduction somewhere. And well, they will never say, "I don't need this."
Yeah. Yeah.
They will always like to see in what kind of company they started working. Yeah.
Right. So we've talked a bit about some, the hardest things that we've encountered, which basically came down to knowing where to start.
Yeah.
We've talked a bit about what can a company do to make that easier.
Yeah.
And now let's have a look at some more specific issues. I find that the first couple of days or the first couple of weeks can be really hard in terms of my self-confidence, because this is a new context. I don't know the domain. I don't know the people well. That is a very hard thing. And also, there's a lot of information coming your way in those first couple of days or weeks. That can quickly lead to an information overload. Like your head is completely full, and you cannot add more information even if you want it. Is this something that you have experience with?
Well, not really with the information overload, I think, because I'm able to process a lot of information. But it also depends on how this information is provided. If you give me a book to read before I have to get started, that might not be the way to provide me that information. I would like to see it in code or in just click around in an application. So I think one thing I would like to mention here is that you can also ask your new hire how he wants to have his or she wants to have his new introduction,
Right.
and what their way of learning is, and figure out how to do that together. What works the best for that particular person, and it might differ per person. And if you do it like that, you will have a personal approach, and people will feel more comfortable when they are joining a team.
Yeah.
I think that will definitely help.
That definitely sounds like a very good way to get acquainted, basically, with whatever new company that you're working for, whether you're an external developer or an internal developer. Because I've struggled sometimes. Some projects I've struggled with feeling comfortable. Having the confidence of knowing I can do this. Even when I know from experience from all the past projects that I've worked on that after a couple of days or sometimes a couple of weeks, it's going to be fine and I can do whatever I do and I add value. Those first couple of days, first couple of weeks can be a bit hard. So getting a bit more personal introduction, that might actually help a lot. I like that.
Okay. Well, that's interesting because I never experienced it like that because, I'm not that uncomfortable with joining a new team. I always see it as a new learning opportunity, and I like to learn. So I'm always kind of excited to get started with a new gig or with a new job. And I'm mostly underestimating myself. I'm not, maybe I'm not fully aware of my capabilities. And I think that's a good thing for me. And for me, it also helps to feel more comfortable. And people are not expecting too much from you when you're not. Maybe it's also part of your name in the PHP community. People know you from the talks you gave and things, so they have some kind of expectation. And maybe that's not the case in my situation yet.
Maybe it's also part of I don't know how the mind works for some people, because I can also imagine that for a junior developer going into a new company, or even a media developer going into a new company, seeing all this code and a domain that they don't know yet, it can be very intimidating.
Well, maybe it's good you just speak out loud to your new hire that it's okay if they don't know anything. And for me, the stupidest questions are the questions that are not asked. If you are a new hire within a team, you're not able to know everything about the company or how processes work in the company, the working process of the development team. You all have to learn that. And especially for a junior developer, just make sure that people are just comfortable to ask questions and tell them it's okay if you don't know how to start your computer. Maybe for the developers this is not really true, but you get my point.
Yeah, I understand what you mean. It is indeed good to openly communicate the expectations so that people know we don't expect, especially when you just started, we don't expect the world of you from day one.
Yeah.
Just take your time. And that, to be honest, that's there's been several projects, but one in particular that I'm thinking of right now, where that was clearly communicated from the first minute that I got access to all the systems. They clearly communicated, okay, we have a very complex domain, we know that, and so we don't expect you to be fully productive within 1 week or 2 weeks, because you'll need to learn this, and it's going to take some time. It takes most developers, over 2 months or 3 months to really grasp what this domain is. So it's okay if it takes a while.
Yeah.
And then, you're comfortable with the fact that it's going to take a while. You're not, because there's been other projects where the domain was not that complex, where I could, get my first pull request merged in the first day.
Yeah.
And so maybe it's also the fact that I sometimes struggle with my own confidence is also related to the fact that I know that I can do that because I've done that before, like pull request done, merged, first day.
Yeah. Yeah. Funny enough, my first pull request mostly is a README change because there's something wrong in the setup.
Right. That is one of the things that I also encounter on a regular basis, and also fixing unit tests. Because one of the first things I do when I have a checkout and I have done the README, etc., and I've set everything up, is run the tests to see if everything is okay.
Yeah.
And then sometimes I figure out, there are some tests that are actually failing. Let me fix that.
Yeah, and then you figure out that they are actually needing some database that is not on your computer, but externally hosted and only accessible via a VPN account, but it's not available yet for you.
I wish I could say that was a joke and wasn't true, but I've been there, I've done that. Yeah, absolutely. So talking about the code base and starting with the code base, can you share some challenges that you encountered, or maybe some tricks that you've used to get to know the code base?
Well, the first challenge is one of the stupidest things I always encounter within every company I join is that accounts are not prepared.
Right.
So I'm not able to get access to the code yet. I also, mostly you need a senior developer or someone with higher security access to get access to particular projects, and it always takes a lot of time, and that might be quite annoying. Um, and when I start analyzing a code base, one of the first things I try to figure out is what package manager is actually used within this project, because that will tell me a lot about what the history is.
Yeah.
Is there a package.json file in the root of your project? Well, most likely yarn is used and npm is used for, or npm is used, I have to say. But if you don't find that one in the root of your project, well, maybe there's a legacy way of installing assets for the front end. The second thing for me to do is check out the composer.json, because I have experience with a lot of different frameworks, and I'm able to recognize from the composer.json how the project is actually built and what kind of components are used. And not just seeing Symfony, which is a framework, but also seeing different components from that particular application to figure out how this project was set up. And the third thing for me to do is analyze the folder structure of the project. Was this project set up with a framework methodology in mind, or did they use another approach?
Right.
So that's one of the, those are the first steps I do.
Yeah. I always like, I mentioned it before, run the unit test, but also look at the unit test, because they, when written well, they can give you a good overview of how the code is structured and what it does. I also, what I like to do is just fire up the application. It's basically what we said earlier, getting a demo from someone from sales or one of the other developers, but also clicking through it yourself. Preferably with, if it's like a Symfony with the debug toolbar, so that you can understand a bit more about the structure, or things like that, tools like that, to be able to look at, what is happening here, how is it structured, and then, of course, you have to learn more about the domain, but at least you have a basic idea of what the code base looks like, and also what quality the tests are, and things like that. Do they have a code sniffer? Do they have PHP Stan?
Yeah,
things like that.
I started mostly with the non-directory structured files at the bottom of your project. Before I start looking into the code, and I must admit I mostly skip the unit tests for some reason.
Okay.
I've seen so many badly written unit tests with different customers that I'm not taking them into account mostly. It's nice if they are there at least. I've seen many projects without any tests, or poorly written tests, or just a bootstrap from a certain framework, because we installed the skeleton and there's a test directory there with one single unit test running the app controller, for example.
Right. Yeah, but even then, that gives you a lot of information. Even if there are no tests, or even if there's only the basic test, or it still gives you a bit of information about what is this code base like.
And if there's a documents folder, it's also interesting to have a look at in there. But unfortunately, in most projects there is no docs folder, or there's no documentation. The documentation is written somewhere else. And I always try to find out where it is, but in most situations there's no documentation at all. And especially within product companies where they are building a single application, there's nearly any documentation at all.
Right.
That's a problem for new people getting on board.
Well, to be fair, I mean, there is a reason why, if you as a company need to be compliant with all kinds of rules, that documentation is one of the main ways of ensuring compliance.
Yeah.
Because if it doesn't document it, it doesn't exist. So
Yeah.
having some documentation is definitely pro. Starting with a good README, of course, in the project, but you can go way beyond that for more information about functionality, code, architecture, etc. Yeah. So now we've talked a bit about the code base. Let's talk a bit more about the social aspect, because what they always say is you have a team, you add someone, and you have a new team.
Yeah.
So when you start a new gig and you go into a team, how do you find your place in the team? How do you figure out what people you're working with?
For me, mostly observing people during the stand-ups. If a team has any stand-ups, but also figure out the rituals and things the teams does on a daily basis. I think we can divide people in three teams or groups of people, where the first part is the people that are talking out loud during the meetings, mostly being senior developers with a lot of experience, or the most experienced developer within the team, the guy who worked here from his first start when he ever started programming at all, or maybe the company owner, which is also joining the stand-ups for some reason. Then you have the second group of people that is mostly the quiet people with an opinion that do not share this opinion. And there's a third group for me, that's the people that are not verbose or are not talking a lot, but also do have an opinion, but not sharing that particular opinion. And those people are the most important people for me, because they mostly know how the team works and what the balance between the team is, or between the team members is. So I try to figure out as soon as possible who those people are and start talking to them, because when they feel comfortable to talk to you with about their experience, you always have some people to fall back on things that happen when you're in conflict with a senior, or with maybe in conflict with the company owner. And it might be small issues, but it's always nice to have somebody to pair with within a team. And for me, that are mostly the quiet people.
I think what you're mentioning is very good, and I think that companies should pay more attention to that, especially to those that are a bit more quiet. I've encountered too many teams where those people that always speak up, they basically rule the team, while the people that are more quiet may have very good ideas, but they don't dare to speak up, or it's not in their character to speak up when someone else is dominating the conversation.
Mm-hmm.
I guess for people that are just starting, I like to observe and be quiet when I just start, just to figure out first, who is who, and things like that. But then after a while, I will every once in a while speak up. But I think companies should look more at their teams and the balance between those people, and make sure that the people that are quiet have the opportunity to sometimes also give their opinion, because their opinion is probably worth quite a lot.
That's why they are there in their team. Is that if their opinion is not worth to be heard, then maybe they should not be part of your team. And it's the team that should do it, at least. And it's not the what I call team hero that will fix every bug for you until he gets a burnout because he did work for 27 hours a day. Yeah.
Yeah, but that also means that as a company, you need to pay attention to the, call it managers or call it scrum masters or whatever, the people that, or maybe even tech leads or team leads, the people that that can enable these people to speak up. You should have the right people in that place as well, not just the managers that want to manage top down and they don't really care, but actual people that know people's skills.
Yeah, and it's not your senior developer that should be the team lead. I think especially a team lead can also be a person with less experience as a developer, but with more social skills, because some senior developers are not very good at giving feedback to juniors, or maybe have the habits to grab the keyboard when pair programming.
Yeah.
I will do this myself because it's much faster when I do it, and you can just watch what I'm doing. That's not the way to have people learning and onboarding. They should have their own opportunities to make errors and learn from that errors.
Yeah, exactly. So the last thing I want to talk about, because we of course talk mostly about from the standpoint of an external developer, a contractor, a consultant, but there's of course also those people that start as an internal developer in a company. What do you think are the differences or the resemblances of the process of starting at a new gig for internal developers versus external hires?
Well, I think internal developers will most of the time get some kind of onboarding process where the external developer is just hired and put into the team and should just hit the ground and start running.
Yeah.
And I think in most situations that might work, but if you really want to invest time on having people onboarded in a positive way, you will benefit from it. In both situations, no matter if you're a contractor or an internal developer, it will definitely help your company if you get them a proper onboarding. And sure, those external developers will figure out a lot themselves because they are used to get to this situation where they have to figure out everything themselves. But it's okay to help them a bit.
Yeah.
And from the other side, it's okay to make sure that your internal developers are able to figure out some things themselves, but also help them to get started if they ask for it.
Yeah.
And just listen to the people, because everyone is different and wants to have a different onboarding. Make it personal.
Yeah. Yeah, I think I really agree with that. First of all, I think the onboarding process basically should be about the same, at least in what you offer as options.
Yeah.
And I think an external developer will automatically skip a couple of steps because they will know how to handle a certain situation, or they will know how to dig into the code base or things like that. But sometimes it's very useful, even for an external developer, to get a bit of help with that. And, so basically the big difference between the onboarding process of an internal hire versus an external hire is that the internal hire will have some perks that the external hire won't have because, if you're on the payroll of a company, then, there are usually some extras.
Yeah, of course.
Because if you're an external hire, then either your boss or yourself, if you're a freelancer, you're responsible for your own home office and your own equipment and things like that, and keeping those working and in a way that you can work easily. And when you're an internal hire, then usually your employer will be able to provide you with a laptop and some kind of home office setup, etc. So that's where the difference will be, and most of the rest should be, or you should at least offer the same things. And whether or not people use that offer, that's a different thing. And then I really like the idea of having that more personal approach, because sometimes when you're just starting, it feels like you're drowning, you're overwhelmed by everything, and it's very hard to understand what's happening and how you can progress, how you can move forward. And having someone that either is by your side or at least is your main contact, that you can always feel comfortable asking a question, that will really help. That personal touch can really help break the barrier of entry into a company.
Yeah. There are two things in my mind right now, and you were talking about a personal approach. I think one of the main things I really appreciated when I started my last gig was the handwritten postcard in my goodie bag, which also included the badge to be able to open the door myself. Also, that's an interesting thing. I've worked for a company where I didn't get that badge for at least 2 weeks because it has to be requested on a security office somewhere outside of the company. And I had to ask a colleague for a badge to get to the toilet. And that's quite annoying. Don't get people into that position. And the second thing was what was something I got annoyed of, was you can also make it too personal or make it ask too direct questions to somebody who is new in your company. For example, the question, how do you experience your first day? Well, I've never... I think that's a very hard question to answer, especially when you're working for, 2 days at the company. Sure, I get a lot of information. I like my team members, but I just know them 2 days. It's hard to get into the code. Yeah, but those sales members are not able to understand that it's hard to get into to this code. Just don't ask about that part. You can ask that after a month or on a review session of the trial period you have together with your new hire. But please don't go there. At least not for me. And
Well, I think it's a good idea to do like regular check-ins, not necessarily constantly asking how are you doing, how are you experiencing this, but just have the opportunity to be able to give some feedback or make sure that everything is fine, and if you have any issues, then you can share them. If not directly outside of those meetings, then at least inside those meetings. That is definitely something that might be useful. That you're not pushing it too much, but there is always that opportunity. And having, that I mentioned it before, having that single person that is responsible for your onboarding that you can always go to and ask questions, that makes it so much easier. It's so much easier to talk to someone when you're stuck.
Maybe it's a good idea to give somebody a real buddy within the team to have some pairing with, or this is the person who will help you through the first weeks.
Okay. I think, at least for me, one of the main takeaways of this whole discussion is that companies maybe should put a bit more effort into the onboarding process, because from our experiences, what I heard, those companies that did put some more effort into that onboarding process made it a lot easier to be productive, a lot quicker. And of course, also, we as developers, when we start, we should ask and we should communicate and we should talk to people. That I think that's the main takeaways for me. What is for you the main and one of the main takeaways?
Well, I had one addition, which I heard about, about a few weeks ago. Was a company that was always sending pre-onboarding emails to new hires. So with a welcome message, okay, next week is your new is your starting day within our company. Be welcome, and you have a first appointment with this person at that point. And if you approach our office, you can park your car over there. If you're coming with the public transport, you should just come from there and take that bus from the train station. And it really helps to get people more happy about the first day. So I found it a really interesting thing. And for me, one of the most important things is the personal approach.
Right.
Ask people how they will, what their way of learning is, and what the best way is to give them their introduction.
Right.
Because it's their introduction, not yours, not a basic thing that you can just take out the closet and this is the playbook we will do together.
Yeah. Okay. Well, thank you very much for joining me in this podcast.
You're welcome.
Thank you for listening also to this podcast. As I mentioned before, we have ingewikkeld.dev/sessions, where you can always find the overview of the current and upcoming sessions. We have Patreon, where you can support us, patreon.com/ingewikkeld. If you pay €3 or more, you get access to our full back catalog of the recordings of the sessions that we've done so far. And of course, there's the podcast. If you're listening to this right now as podcast, you already know about it. But if you are not subscribed yet, then please subscribe. And if you are checking this out on Patreon or on our YouTube, then feel free to also check your favorite podcast app for the Ingewikkeld Sessions podcast. And then you can subscribe there and get the new podcast directly into your podcasting app when we publish it. So thank you very much, and we'll see you next month.